The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Hoop Ballers! Welcome back to another episode of Today in Sports Betting. I'm your host, Devin Ellington, at DALE007 on Twitter. And this is a hoop-ball.com presentation. Go to hoop-ball.com. I know. We're still working on the domain. There's people that don't want to give that hyphen up. But for now, hoop-ball.com. Go over there, check out the premium content, Wager Pass, $9.99 a month, 33 cents a day, 10 professional handicappers. Can't really ask for much more value than that. I mean, I guess you could, but I don't know if you'll find it. Free content, forums, fantasy basketball communities. At Hoopball Gaming is the gambling division's specific Twitter, where you'll see the show links and all of our plays. At Hoopball Tweets, that's just going to be the motherboard. If you need some just basic basketball information, injury news and tickers, that kind of stuff, we've got you covered there. And then also, don't want to forget to talk about manscaped.com, the show's sponsor. Go over there, use promo code HoopBall20, HOOPBALL20, and you will get 20% off as well as free shipping. I recommend using it on at least the Lawnmower 3.0, which has a built-in LED light and anti-tugless technology. I've never had a razor that resembled RoboCop so much, and it's awesome. So go use that. Get some of those beard balms and oils and hair scrubs for us men. The razor quality is phenomenal. Weed Whacker, get that if you have nose and ear hair issues like I do. I'm pushing 30, so it's bound to happen. It's happening a lot more frequently now. So HoopBall20 is the promo code. Use that. Go over to manscaped.com. Let them know we sent you and get your lawn mowed. So I like getting the intros and stuff in the premium Hoopball out of the way a little quicker whenever I have an exciting show, whenever I have an awesome guest coming on the show. And that is the exact occurrence for today, March 2nd, 2021. Happy birthday, Pops. He's not my guest. I didn't bring my dad on for today. But one person that is on the show today is someone that I look up to, kind of like, oh, that's a little weird. I'm not going to say that. But I look up to him. Man, so I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. Another gracious guest of Odds Shark just coming on Hoopball. And again, it's just like a little fangirl moment anytime I have one of these affiliates of OddsShark on. And, the work, I've preached about it on the show, the data, the content. I know a lot of you in the Discord servers for our premium use OddsShark. You guys are referencing them all the time. So I know you're familiar, and this is going to be a treat. So without further ado, and I'm sorry if I pronounced the last name wrong. I'm from Oklahoma, so I got that Midwestern drawl. But Mr. Gallant,
great pronunciation.
Okay, all right. I get self-conscious because there's just some names where us Midwesterners add an extra syllable in, and it's just messy sometimes.
You don't need to be from the Midwest to do that, man. I've been dealing with that my entire life.
Fair enough. Well, yes, folks, without further ado, Gilles Gallant from OddsShark and the prop king, self-proclaimed. But I mean, I think I see the Twitter following and the Twitter interactions. There's a lot of people that proclaim you as the prop king. So turnover, the end of drives kind of result bets, just the most crazy value driven. We'll get into the NBA underdog stuff, but I'm getting way ahead of my marbles. He's at GDog5000, all caps, on Twitter. Check his workout over at oddshark.com, obviously. But Gee, I'm gonna let you just take it from here.
Yeah, sure, man.
I spilled most of the marbles, but I
No,
saved.
no, Devin, you promoted me well. So yeah, I'm Gilles Gallant. I'm with Oddshark. I write NBA and NFL mainly for the site, but I kind of master of all, maybe master of none, depending on how you view me. I mean, I think you sold me fairly well. I think one thing you did omit from my bio is I have a very punchable face. For anybody who happens to be listening, you might not be able to see it, but you could just look at my profile picture on Twitter and you'll find out pretty quickly. But yeah, I don't know if I would call myself the king of props in general. I would definitely say that I'm in royalty, or at least in line for the throne for touchdown props, specifically for NFL, and maybe to a lesser extent for live turnover props, because that's what I've been doing for turnover props. And you sold it fairly well, is that what I'm doing is basically playing in game, and I'm playing teams to turn the ball over on a respective drive. And I'll post it just before the drive starts. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. Again, a lot of the time, pardon me, the spreads are plus 500, or pardon me, the odds are plus 400 or plus 500. So an applied probability around there of probably less 20% or less. So a lot of the time I do hit them, but at the same time, I think what I've done now is I've maybe had a little too much early success, where now a lot of my following maybe are wondering why I'm not hitting them anymore, or why I'm having struggles sometimes, because the reality is that the probability of them hitting is probably less than 20%. But when you have a little bit of a run like I did, maybe in my first couple of seasons of working with Oddshark, winning is expected.
Well, I mean, when you think of the organization of Oddshark, I mean, winning, it's kind of, the content that you guys put out is phenomenal. So the fact that each of you has your own specific niche that you're really, really phenomenal at. Sorry for the pressure, bud, but your following expects you to win.
I know. I appreciate that, Devin. Honestly,
Yeah.
like that's the thing. Like anytime I have support from guys like you, or or other followers or whatever, like it's something that I never really thought of that was going to happen when I started at Oddshark. It was more just, here are the angles that I like to play. Here are the narratives, or the angles or the stats that I consider that are important. And like my colleagues, like Joe Osborne, we have different betting styles. We can both be successful. Pam is another one who has a different betting style than I do. We do both focus on statistics specifically, but at the same time, maybe we think about the game a little differently. Or a former colleague of mine, Chris Abbott, or Scott Hastings, or even Ian McMillan. We all kind of have a little bit of a different mantra, and I think that's one thing that's really nice about Oddshark in general, is that we're not all just trained to handicap a game the same way.
Right. It gives a different, sharp perspective for sure from each of you. Lots of great name drops there. Again, a lot of Oddshark history here on the show, and just continuingly, gladly continuing it. So, we talked about Oddshark and everything, and told the folks about the Twitter handle. Is there any other? Are you active anywhere else? Are you putting content out anywhere else?
I mean,
that keeps you
outside
busy?
of Oddshark and Twitter, that's pretty much
as
far as I like to go, because I'm not old, but I don't like to do a ton of social media. So I'm not like on TikTok, and to a lesser extent, I'm not really on Instagram that much, or even Facebook for that matter. I'm not really that much on it anymore. Twitter, the only reason I'm on it is to promote my content from Oddshark, and obviously post my picks when I decide to play them. I don't necessarily post every play that I do, just because I don't want my feed to only be that. Plus, I think that's the other thing too, is just the stigma that a lot of the time, a lot of followers, especially new people who might follow me, think that that's all I exist to do, or that I'm, where's your premium package? Where's the VIP package? That kind of thing. And it's like, no, I'm actually posting picks because I want you to read the content and the angles that I came up with at Oddshark. And, like this morning, I just went on a nice little run of writing. It was a nice article on the Knicks and their first half against the spread run, how they've covered the spread in 13 straight games, and how they have the best spread record in the NBA for first halves. So I was just kind of more diving into that, showing the angles, how we got there, the type of profits you could have made if you were banking on them, and kind of how to look at it going forward. But if I just posted Knicks first half spread against the Spurs tonight and didn't preview the article or whatever else, then most people would just think that I'm just betting on the Knicks tonight and that's it. And it's like, no, here's actually the reasons why. Here's some of the stuff that I went through. Here's kind of a recap and kind of get you up to speed if you weren't paying attention, because I don't expect everybody to be paying attention to first half spreads, let alone about the Knicks, who haven't been relevant in years.
Yeah, it's again phenomenal pointing that out, because personally and in vanity speaking, for me, whenever I first started handicapping and doing this endeavor of recording and, writing my own stuff, NBA first half betting numbers and everything, the way that it was broken down by the team and Mr. JTFOZ.
Yes, Joe Osborne.
Joe Osborne. I call him Papa Joe whenever I interact on Twitter with him. So, just that's what I love. And then the first quarter numbers too, the updated numbers that you guys continuously put up on that. And I could just pretty much fill this whole episode about high praises for OddsShark and what
I'm for it. I'm okay with it. We can use this entire time. If you just want to sit here and relish me with compliments, I'll take it. It's a little flattering, but at the same time, I don't get it in very many other walks of life. So again, if you just want to sit there and do that, I'll just sit here and listen. If you just want to keep going,
I'll paint you one of my French girls or something like that. No, so on a much more serious note, I did have some questions, just to help maybe the listeners get a little more familiarization with yourself. Because obviously, I followed you for a little while now, and I'm a little more familiar perhaps, but and then one of those things being that OddsShark is a native of Canada, and I believe I asked you this off camera, but for the listener's sake, are you as well? And if you
I am, and I think, I don't know if people could tell from my accent or maybe from the look or even just the name, because the name, honestly, Gilles Gallant, is probably the most, it's Acadian, first off, but it's probably, if you were to look up Acadian history, it's probably the most Acadian name you could find outside of, say, Jacques Cartier or Samuel de Champlain, you know what I mean? My name is the next step lower. So the name, I think, is a pretty dead giveaway that I'm Canadian, but I am from Canada. OddsShark is based in Canada, and it's the current employees like Joe Osborne or Ian McMillan. To let the cat out of the bag, yes, we are all Canadian, and we all work together, and we all see each other.
Yeah. So is that, when you say Acadian, is that gonna be more like French? Okay, French.
Yeah, French settlers. So gotcha. I don't know if you're not to go too deep into North American history here and the history of Canada, but essentially Acadians were some of the first settlers in Canada before they got expelled in the late 1700s. So I'm back, I guess, if that makes any sense. But no, I'm just joking. But yeah, but basically Acadian French is a different style of French than, say, native Quebec French, for example.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm a big history nerd, and I love geography and stuff. So learning a little bit more about, not only the people that I have on the show, but maybe where they're from, especially if it's a different country. That's pretty interesting to me. So this show's pretty much just going to be all selfish, delights of mine. So I'm going to have,
let's indulge,
yeah. All right. So we talked about how you approach your betting and your style and the extreme value and some of the, high risk bets that you place. But when was it you finally, was it after you joined OddsShark? But when was it you finally realized how good you were at this style of prop betting compared to the average bear of the handicapper, out there?
I guess, Devin, maybe it still hasn't dawned on me that I think that I'm good. Because again, I think one of the things for me is I like to look at overall profits at the end of the year. But if you just looked at me from a win percentage standpoint, and just an edge from outside looking in, you probably would be wondering why I'm putting so much risk on touchdown scores that pay like plus 500 or more, or like, a plus 1,200 bet on a quarterback or whatever, because for me, it's about the overall results. So I think the one thing that I would be careful of is I would never say that I'm the best at something, like especially this type of market. What I would say is that for me, I think because of my history and knowledge and experience of using and betting this market, I'm able to maybe audible or adjust or maybe see things that maybe other people don't do, who may be kind of coming into the market for the first time. Like at the start of the last NFL season, there's a lot of new people maybe betting on touchdown scores, whether it be any time or first touchdown, and that aren't used to it and don't really know what to look for, whether that's a good odds placement for a respective player, or whether that's a good odds or a good matchup for that player, for example. So for me, I've kind of started to realize that now every NFL season is a little different. Some teams are better than the previous year, personnel or matchups change, odds fluctuate as well. So a lot of adjustments and a lot of audibling in that spot. Now, I would say that from my past 2 seasons, now I haven't really I've been betting touchdown scores for years. So just to let that kind of out of the bag. But the reality is that I only really started posting them over the last 2 seasons, because the first season that I was working with OddsShark, and kind of that was my first year at OddsShark, I wasn't really active on social media like I was, but I wasn't trying to promote myself maybe as much. And I think I was still kind of unsure if this was a good long-term career move for myself, coming from a sales and marketing background and just kind of being an overall sales aspect. Even though I was sports betting for years and have a journalism background and everything else, I just wasn't sure if being on social media or even just promoting myself of what the picks that I do, if it was even worth it, if people were even clicking over to read my content. Now I know that they are. So that's kind of what happened, is that coming into the 2019 the 2019 season, I was posting mainly just the touchdown scores for primetime games. And I went on a hell of a run. Like, I have no really other way to describe it. Like, I went on like a run. Like, there was points that I was hitting touchdown scores, like a 25-1 touchdown score, hitting these in-game ones, like Byron Pringle caught 1 touchdown all of 2019, and somehow that's the one game that I decided I'm going to bet on him, and I hit him at 30-1, like kind of thing. So the first season for primetime games specifically, I finished up 92 units for primetime games, just single betting, no parlays, just betting. Then the second season, this past season, is where I decided to branch out. So this is like the equivalent of when the restaurant wants to open up a second location. So I was doing primetime games, but then I was also betting on Sunday afternoon games, so the 1 p.m. Eastern and the 4 p.m. Eastern games. Now, the issue with that is what was happening to me is that with primetime games, you have a little bit of more of an edge to kind of bet multiple bets. So because if 2 of them don't hit, but 2 of them do, you could still end up with maybe 2 to 5 units of profit, depending on whatever the odds are. When you're doing it on a Sunday and you have 13 games to look at, and you're trying to release maybe 6 to 7 of your favorite plays, it gets a little dicey because you're spreading yourself too thin and trying to dive into each one. And as a result, what's happening is that maybe you're overlooking some things that maybe make it a little easier to be able to cap a primetime game. So this season, I finished up like 25, like I think it was 26 units when I just looked at it a couple of weeks ago for primetime games. But I ended up finishing like minus 26 units for Sunday afternoon games. So they ended up canceling each other out. And that's what kind of, I don't want to say that it lowered or ruined reputation or anything like that, but it just basically what it's made me realize is that Sunday afternoon games, I have to categorize those as separate type of bets, because it's almost like I don't want to say they're 2 different games, but there's just so many games going on, and you want to find the right angle for every game that you end up kind of spreading yourself too thin from a research standpoint. There's only so much data and so many gut decisions that you can make based on the odds and based on everything else that you factor into those types of bets, that it's holding me back. So I think probably what I'll end up doing for 2021 is I'll probably reduce the amount of bets that I do for the Sunday games like the Sunday 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. games and just focus strictly on prime time. And that's kind of what I would suggest to other people too, for anybody who wants to get into this market, is that if you're looking at it, really try to focus on one game at a time and really try to find an edge there and try to maybe like spread your bets, maybe 2 to 3. Like what I like to do is I like to take one bet per team. Then I like to take a mid-tier kind of bet, maybe like plus 400 to plus 600. And then I like to take one more bet, a long shot bet, like a 12 to 1, 15 to 1, maybe even 25 to 1. And I bet one unit on each. And then if you just hit the long shot, that covers your bet and then covers maybe even 3 or 4 games in advance kind of thing. Whereas if you hit maybe 2 or 3 of the mid-tier or lower tier ones, then at least that way you're just covering, and you might even make some profit just from that game and then going forward. So that's that a little bit in a nutshell. We can expand on that a little bit more as far as process goes and whatever else, but that's kind of what it is about touchdown scores, and probably why people would consider me or give me high praise about them. It's because not only am I betting them and am I promoting them, but I'm also offering people information about them that they can't easily find themselves, like whether it be, you know, overall targets and red zone targets, and factoring in things that maybe people aren't necessarily looking at when they're just looking at a list of odds and they're like, oh, okay, well, Gronk's plus 200. I like Gronk. I know Gronk. I'm just going to bet him. Right. And that can work sometimes, but more often than not, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think what really sealed the deal for me, just being all out impressed with you, was there was a game, I want to say it was Monday night game last year when it was the Bears. I think you probably know which one I'm talking about.
I know exactly. I was reluctant to even bring it up because I didn't know if we wanted to talk about that game yet. But that is the game that essentially, I don't want to call it, I don't know how, it sounds lame to even say it out loud. It made me Twitter famous for like a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, I guess. I can go into that story if you want, but essentially what it is, it was week 3 of the 2019 season. It was the Bears on the road playing the Washington football team.
That's what it was, yeah.
And it was Case Keenum at quarterback. And essentially, this was one of the first times that I had ever bet live turnover props. So this is what this is all about. That game, what I did was I looked at kind of Washington's personnel, and I realized I was looking at Case Keenum and I was looking at his yards per attempt. And I was also looking at, you could find these anywhere, but online, but I was looking at his throw spray chart in a sense, like looking to see kind of where most of us, were they going to the sidelines? Were they going over the middle? And how many yards were they going? And I was looking at Keenum's stuff through the first 2 games of the season. And I was like, man, he throws it over the middle way too much for how talented he is, which is not much. Like, I mean, yes, he did technically take the Vikings to 13-3 the year before, but there's a reason why he got exposed in that NFC Championship game versus the Eagles. But nevertheless, basically what I did is I bet Washington turnover on 4 of their first 5 drives. Hit every one at plus 450. First, like it was first drive of the game. The Bears have it, or pardon me, the Washington has it. I wanted to say Redskins there, no, I won't. I'm going to neglect to say that. But Keenum basically throws it over the middle. Clinton Dix takes it back for a pick 6 immediately. And so that kind of blew up where people were like, "Holy crap!" Like that guy just predicted that. And I posted it like 5 minutes before it happened, and people were just like, "Oh my god!" Like, and I decided the next drive I'm going to run it back. I'm like, why not? It's like, whatever. The Bears are, and the Bears are a fairly strong defense, especially even like I know that they were coming off the 2018 season where they were really strong from a defensive standpoint. 2019, they had regressed a little bit, but they still had a lot of talent to be able to force these kinds of turnovers against a team like that. And they got a strip sack on the next one. When I say I bet 4 or 5, they had 5 turnovers that game. I didn't bet the third one because I ended up going to the washroom because I was so amped. I had to pee, and I come back and they turned the ball over again. And I'm like, are you effing kidding me? I cannot believe I missed out on that. So that's what ended up happening is I bet 4 of the 5 turnovers, and I hit them each time while posting them on Twitter beforehand. And that's how I've kind of gotten a little bit of a following as a result. So I ended up finishing that game up 32 units for that game.
Oh my gosh.
I'm very happy. Like it was one of those, like I'll tell my grandchildren about that type of story.
Yeah.
But it was one of the types of angles that I just happened to recognize at the moment. It's one of the, I can't really explain other than a gut feel. Like obviously I had all the stats to support it, but even then it's still a little ballsy to take a turnover prop when it's so easy for a quarterback just to throw a ball in the dirt and then punt it away, especially if you're a struggling offense in the NFL. And yeah, so that season I was having lots of luck with it because I was identifying matchups where you're seeing this very stout defense, like Patriots defense in the first 8 weeks of 2019 was amazing for this type of bet. And they were playing against chumpy teams like the Jets and the Giants with quarterbacks who love to turn the ball over. So again, if the book is going to offer me plus 400 on a drive to turn the ball over, and you've got Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones throwing the ball against this type of defense, I'm going to bet it probably each time for the first 4 drives, because at those odds, if you hit it once, you're up profit immediately. So that's kind of how I looked at it as a long-term game. I'm saying from a turnover prop standpoint, for anybody who is planning to do this type of prop or even looking into it for next season, use those types of stats to look at kind of where you could find defensive and offensive mismatches for that, and be prepared to lose. That's the other thing too, is that with any of these bets, there are times where I will bet the first 4 drives and I lose 4 units right there just from that game because it just didn't work out. And but at the same time, there are other games where I hit 2 of 4 and I'll make 8 units of profit immediately, or 6 units of profit rather, if they're all at plus 400 odds. And I'm like, okay, done. First half is over. I can go to bed now. Like, I'm already up 6 units. I don't even care how the rest of this game goes. And that's the one thing that I would say is that I almost have to have separate bankrolls. I have bankrolls for touchdown scores. I have bankrolls for turnover props, and I keep them separate because if you try to include them and you try to look at overall profits together, you'll just make your head spin with trying to make it so that way you can just end up with profit at the end of the day.
That's a really good deep dive and curtain pull from you on that. And I really just wanted to talk about that specific game because I'm not sure if, some of the newer listeners or just some of our listeners in general.
You can go look it up. Week 3. Go look it up. I'll probably tweet it out maybe this upcoming year. Just be like what
anniversary.
Yeah. Like I don't really do that very often on Twitter, but you can go look it up. Week 3, Bears versus Washington. In 2019, it was just a turnover fest for Washington, and it was hilarious.
I was just sitting there looking at Twitter and looking up at the screen. I'm just like, no way. And it was like the 3rd one in a row. I was like,
I had people texting me while it was happening. They're like, dude, just pull the chute and get out. Like, you're up this much. Like, what's the point? And I'm like, you watch. And they're like, are you effing kidding me? Like my phone was blowing up pretty much the entire night.
Yeah. It was a cool thing to see. I never really known of a handicapper that was taking those kinds of angles, but 2, also just the Nostradamus like approach. And you spoke about gut feeling a couple of times, and people may think as handicappers, we just rely on, personnel and numbers and meat and potatoes, and that's it. But to be honest, when I'm looking through a card and I'm doing my first digs and like I'm trying to figure out what I want to put on it, I use a lot of my, just basic sports IQ and familiarization and gut feelings about when I'm building a card. So on top of that gut feeling, and then a bit more of the process that you already explained, what would you say that you tend to, break down more of or really just rely on more? Would it be the quantitative measures of probability and outcome, or is it that gut that you spoke of a couple of times?
I think it depends on the sport. So if we're doing touchdown scores, a lot of the time it's going to be stats, then odds, then personnel in that order. But a lot of the time the gut will be the overriding factor of like this. It's the CEO of my betting strategy in a sense. Like, it's like, okay, we have all these factors, you presented it to me. The gut now has to make the decision based on what we've seen. So with touchdown scores, like I have to know snap counts. I have to know targets. I have to know red zone opportunities. I have to know, like, you have to know these things before you make a bet like that. Because if you're just looking at the odds and you think to yourself, okay, Alvin Kamara at minus 150, that's a lock. It's not. Like, he probably hit, when I looked at his 16 game schedule this past season, he scored touchdowns in, I want to say 10 of the 16 games. And he was minus odds for every game. And if you had just blindly bet Alvin Kamara every game to score a touchdown, in some games he was minus 200, you would be down profit. Like you would, like if you're just betting the same amount. So that's the one thing that I would try to say is like, don't always just think to yourself that I have to take the favorites for touchdown scores, because while they are heavily featured, the opposition knows that too. And they're going to try to neutralize them. And they're going to put their best corner on the best wide receiver. They're going to stack the box when they're on the goal line and Derrick Henry is about to rush downhill on you. Now, so that's kind of what I would say for touchdown scores. Now, for NBA, I'm probably more of a matchup guy than I am probably stats, just because of my history. Like I've watched the NBA now since 1992 is probably like, I mean, really generally, like when I've been actually watching it, like every game was probably not until about the mid to late 90s. But even then I wasn't like looking at it from a betting sphere, like looking at it from a betting angle. It wasn't until about the mid 2000s when the Phoenix Suns and Steve Nash were really good, like kind of like 2004, 2005, when I really started kind of taking off and really starting to bet them regularly. But for me, matchups is key, because I'll be looking at, you know, just like I'll use what's a good team from a matchup perspective, that like there are certain teams that can excel without their stars. Let's just say that right now. So that can, whether it be from an odds maker standpoint or just winning the game. And you have to be able to identify those. And so a lot of the time what I like to do is just look to see how those teams performed without those players in mind. Trying to kind of maybe just project like maybe an overall outcome. Who's going to guard this guy? Who's going to guard that guy? When we get down, because every game that if you're ever taking a spread, which I kind of loathe right now in the NBA, but at the same time, if you're taking a minus spread or a plus spread, you're always looking at fourth quarter scoring. I think that's one of the main things that people have to look at as well, is how are these teams performing in the final few minutes of these games and the clutch moments. And certain teams can excel without their star player in that spot. Other teams don't. And then, of course, then you have to look at the spreads and odds and whether or not that reflects based on what you've seen from a matchup perspective and stats perspective. And then you have to decide whether or not you want to play it. That's kind of why I have kind of transitioned all the way over to taking like completely overcorrected it, actually, where I'm just now betting exclusively NBA underdogs on the money line.
I'm really happy you brought that up and we made that transition, because I know it was something I was going to want to dig into more, especially with us being in the thick of the NBA season and All-Star break coming up. It's hard to find anything better than mid-90s and early 2000s basketball, though, while we're, you know, on that tangent. There's just some of those teams that, man, they were just so good. You know, the early 2000s Kings teams, the early 2000s
Easily.
Pacers teams, the Suns you referenced to. People forget that, like, there were some really great teams earlier.
Well, they only think about the Lakers three-peat around that time, or even the Spurs winning
the Spurs dynasty
in 99, then 2004, or then maybe the Pistons, obviously, to a lesser extent. If we're just talking about early 2000s, late 90s kind of thing. But I think that's the one thing, is that I'm probably one of the more nostalgia nuts when it comes to that kind of stuff. And that's just because of age. Like, I'm 36, so I've seen a lot in my day, which obviously only helps from a handicapping perspective. I personally believe, and again, I'm a big proponent of this, that in order to predict the future, you need to know your history. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that a lot of young handicappers who are coming up, who are maybe 25 or younger or whatever, aren't historians of the game. I'm sure they are, and have also played and probably look at a lot of the same things. But I think one of the things that you see is, and it's no different than even just in the NBA in general, is that older teams, not too old, obviously, but older, more experienced teams have more success in the NBA or in the NFL. So why wouldn't that be the case for pro sport handicapping?
Yeah. Experience is key. You know, all right, just little tangent here about myself. You know, I'm 29, I'm pushing 30, so a little bit younger, but I love things that are older than me. You know, like my music, my shows, my movies, my basketball, pretty much all of it. And just the other day, this is how I spent my wild Saturday night. I pulled up a random 1995 Western Conference playoff game, and the first video that popped up on YouTube was the
hold on, 1995 Western Conference Final?
That's the one that popped up, yeah.
That would be Houston versus, I want to say Phoenix, but I don't think it was.
There's another great big man.
Well, then I was going to say is it Utah?
Spurs.
Yeah, Spurs. Okay, so David Robinson. Like, I was going to say, like, it was either the Sonics Spurs, or the Suns, because those were the 4 teams around that time.
Yeah, but great matchup. Sam Cassell, Robert Ory, Kenny the Jet,
Smith, Vernon Maxwell.
Let's see, the Spurs.
I mean, don't forget about Clyde. That would have been Clyde's first year there. He got traded at the deadline there.
Then there was, on the Spurs side, obviously, like Vinny Del Negro and Byron. Wow, I just blanked. Byron Scott.
Yeah. Or not Sam Elliott. I wasn't going to with the
Sean Elliott.
Say Sean Elliott.
And he was a stud, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He was a stud.
Coming out of Arizona, he was awesome. And he's still technically one of the all-time great Spurs there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, what I love when I watch these older things and these older replays and full game highlights, I forget a lot about the coaches back. Like, I forgot that Bob Hill was coaching the Spurs in that, time frame. And then I was like, well, F it. I'm going to dig into Bob Hill. Who's Bob Hill? He had a pretty decent coaching career. Kind of looked like the mayor of Whoville, but he was a good, like, he was like the Popovich before the Popovich. So,
or even Rudy T, man. Rudy,
yes. Awesome. Yeah. John Travolta himself. He looks so identical. I thought it was John Travolta when I first saw Rudy Tom on the sideline in that clip. Who was a great player for the Rockets also. Mr. Tomjanovich was. Watched the 1979 Indiana State DePaul Final Four matchup to go play Magic Johnson in Michigan State. A lot of great players on those teams. A lot of the high school class of 79 that was coming in that they were talking about, the All-Americans. You had guys like Ralph Sampson, 7'3" kid coming out of high school, and a couple names other that escaped me. But just that pocket of basketball is what's so great and awesome about the historical side of the game. And I'm just a huge fan of it. It's the videotape recording, the bad quality, the funny music, just all of it.
The production side is one thing, but the actual basketball is actually like for some people who were born in, like, let's say 2000, have no idea what half court basketball is, or like, or just that 3-point, like seeing the NBA game and seeing teams average 5 3-point attempts per game for the entire team.
Yeah.
Whereas now the Knicks, who is it? No, not the Knicks, the Jazz lead the NBA in 3-point attempts this season with 42 and a half 3-point attempts per game. Like, it's mind-boggling.
Wild. I did not know that. That's crazy. I did not know that they attempted that many threes per game. And then you look at where they were when Jerry Sloan was the coach, with guys, I mean, sure, they had their shooters, and Kirilenko and Mehmet Okur would step out, but Mr. Havlicek in the 90s was their sharpshooter, or Hornacek. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Hornacek. Yeah. Well, and Stockton to a lesser extent. I mean, if you're just using the 90s as an example, they had that same core pretty much most of the mid to late 90s.
18 years.
They made the finals 2 years in a row, obviously, to play the Bulls, and then in 99 they were tied for the best record in the NBA with the Spurs in that lockout season, and then and I'm pretty sure Malone won MVP that year. And then the next year, like, they made the playoffs every year that Malone and Stockton were on the team. So
yeah. Just a great model of consistency. And of course there's the nostalgic throwback of having the Supersonics as an NBA franchise, which Adam Silver, if you're listening, which I've heard he is a frequent listener of this podcast. We need another Seattle team. It would be really great to have. Man, was not expecting to go off on that little historical tangent.
No, it's all right, man. I don't mind shooting the shit about basketball and old school basketball, man. Yeah. I love it.
It's one of the most fun things to do because, you start reminiscing and forgetting about certain guys. Like the other day, I thought about Bonzi Wells for some reason. I don't know why, but I was just thinking about Jamal Mashburn and Jamal McGlure. And I was like, wait, who else was on those New Orleans Hornets teams? And
the only one that you're talking about, like, where McGlure and Mashburn. So that would have been first or second season, because Chris Paul played there for about 6 years before he got traded to the Clippers. So that would have been the first 2 seasons. That was 2004, 2005.
Yeah. was it Chris Anderson and David West? Yeah.
Yep. David Wesley.
David Wesley.
Yeah. No. So there's a lot of good players that from that team that went on to make impacts for other NBA franchises. And then I think even one year they had Tyson Chandler there for a brief stint as well. So like there's a lot of like fun, like, did you remember this player? Do you remember that player kind of thing from the 2000s that sometimes it helps to have a league pass subscription, because sometimes I'll just kind of go in and just watch some of these old games or whatever else. I mean, you can find most of them on YouTube at this stretch anyway, but I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why The Last Dance was so successful, because it gave us nostalgia for remembering the 90s, because I was there or not there, but like I saw every single one of these moments. So a lot of the stuff that they were saying in The Last Dance was not new to me. But at the same time, it gave an appreciation for people who were maybe born 2000 or later, or who have never got to see Michael Jordan play in a Bulls uniform, to be able to appreciate his greatness and appreciate old school basketball.
Right. I got chills thinking about it. That documentary was so good. Unpopular opinion here, and I don't care, but I actually like the Best of Enemies I think it's a 3 or 4 part series better than The Last Dance. About the rivalry and the franchises of the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers.
So that's that 3-part one for the 30 for 30 that they did. Yeah,
what I love is it starts from the 1950s, from the bowels of history of the Celtics and the Lakers, and it just talks about how Red Auerbach traded, what is it, like the ice rink girls to get rights to draft Bill Russell,
Well, that's what they did back in the day.
And just the history also, the way America was at that time. Like I said, I love history. So that tied in a couple of different dynamics that I'm a huge fan of. Just the whole start of Showtime, and which, early 2000s kids probably know who Magic Johnson is. I'm not trying to short sell the generation after me or whatever, but I don't think they truly understand, Pat Riley, how he went from color commentator to Lakers coach in a 4-month swing.
Well, and not only that, but Pat Riley, they might even know from the Lakers, or maybe even to a lesser extent with the Heat.
The Heat.
But I don't think anybody or a lot of people remember his stint, for 4 to 5 seasons as the Knicks head coach, and giving the Bulls like a legit challenge, like in 97 and 98. So yeah, like I think that documentary, while I appreciate it, I think just the reality was why I would probably have it a little bit less, even though they got all the key players and everybody to talk about it. I almost feel like that rivalry is just beaten over the head now, like to the point like where, you have, there was a documentary on Magic and Bird. There's a book about it. There's it's pretty much talked about as the thing that saved the NBA, like their national championship game, and then also entering the NBA right after it. So I'm not trying to diminish it. I think just by the time I saw those documentaries, I had already done what feels like hours of just situational research, whether it be I'm just on my own or just, osmosis of listening to other people talk about it. Whereas with the Bulls, that one felt like I was like, okay, because again, it's not to say that the 80 that wasn't important. Just I wasn't there. Like I didn't get to watch those games live. Some of them were even tape delayed, so you wouldn't have been able to watch them live anyway. Yeah. But the Bulls games, like you could, like back in the 90s, when you had even less channels now than you have access to now, or streaming services or whatever, like when the Bulls were on TV, like it could be just a regular Bulls Cavaliers game in mid-April, when the Bulls already have the 1 seed locked up, and you're watching and you're still seeing MJ in like 92 and 93, or, in later parts of the 90s, still just dominate and do stuff on the court that you've never seen before, and against stud players and stud defensive players. And, so a lot of the time it was great to kind of see that kind of stuff and just to witness greatness.
And you speak of greatness, and that's the thing about those that generation of players, fading out from the late 80s into the 90s. I mean, you just look at every NBA franchise within that timeline. almost every single one of them had a Hall of Famer or two. That just golden age. To me, it's the golden age of modern basketball. It's just the players, the coaches, some of the GMs back then. It just, and anywhere in America, like you said, if there was a TV screen, it wouldn't have mattered if you were in Rhode Island, if you were in Oklahoma, if you were out in Montana, the Bulls were probably going to be on TV. And that was just, that just speaks to this ain't a word, but I'm going to use it, phenomedy.
Or just a phenomenon of
there
of
you
the
go.
Bulls
I
in
could
general.
actually just use the real word.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, and for me, being someone who is just on that cusp of missing out, of being like, a teenager who loved basketball, and just missing, that greatness of Michael Jordan and the Bulls and the rest of the other Hall of Fame, the Barkleys and the John Starks and the Ewings and Olajawans and all of them. I kind of wish I had like a few more years under my belt just so I could have retained a lot more vivid imagery and a lot more just vivid memories of what was going on in the 90s with the NBA and the greatness of all that.
And I think we all feel that if you're an NBA fan. Like, I feel like I wish I was maybe a little bit older so I could have witnessed portions of the Celtics and Lakers dynasties, right? Like, just in being able to see them in person, because again, you see all the footage and I can watch a game here, a game there. But just being able to kind of see the way that it developed in real time and how it impacted history, those would be the reasons why I wish. And again, it's probably the only reason I'll ever wish that I was older.
Yeah. For sports and concert events in general.
Seeing Led Zeppelin in concert or something.
I was going to say, I know I'll never get to see the Beastie Boys now, so I would definitely go back to the 90s to catch a Beastie Boys show. Rest in peace, MCA, one of the best MCs ever. Got some culture and stuff involved in there. I mean, I would love to go back and be in the garden, the hot, stinky garden in the 70s. Like, that just sounds like fun to me. Like, if I could.
Well, I'm just thinking because I don't smoke anymore, but I just think of, it used to be this way even back in so I'm from Canada, obviously. And back in the early 2000s, you could still smoke in the concourse of Expo Stadium in Montreal, for example. So back when they were terrible before they moved, in the 90s, in the late 90s, you could still kind of go watch Vladimir Guerrero, you know what I mean? Watch these kind of games, but you would literally just leave your seat and go buy 2 steps away from you, they're buying food and buying beer and you're just sitting there hopping a dart kind of thing. Whereas now, you can't smoke at all in these stadiums. I'm not saying that that's a nostalgia thing, but I'm just saying that's kind of you're thinking of the hot, stinky type of environments like that. That's kind of what it reminds me of. And easily I could still smell the stale smoke.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're telling me you don't want to go back to being able to smoke in schools and hospitals?
Yes. Let's confirm that. Gilles is against smoking in hospitals and schools.
Hey, it was cool while it lasted. But yeah, the Expos. Yeah. Probably one of the first baseball teams I remember, just because they were so unique looking with that bubble M and the colors and the fact that they were the Canadian team of the 90s.
Yeah, and most of my family's from there, so I don't want to say that I wasn't a Blue Jays fan growing up, because I was, but at the same time, I always had a special place for the Expos because they were just kind of the scrappy kids that just could never get over the hump. They were basically just a glorified farm team for other teams to poach their talent kind of thing, to basically a worse version of the Miami Marlins, if that's possible. Obviously Miami just made the playoffs this year, so they're starting to rebound, but basically that version where just they would develop these nice homegrown pieces of talent and they wouldn't be able to afford them because they had a cheap owner, and then would just sell them, and then the attendance and everything else just declined to the point where the team had no choice but to move to Miami. So not Miami rather, but just move to Washington. And so that's kind of the way it goes, but at the same time, from a nostalgia standpoint, I try not to live too much in the past, just because I've got a nice bright future in front of me. And sometimes if you focus too much on the past, you don't you don't focus on the present and enjoy what you got.
You got to relish it. That's for sure. And that's, well said by you. I've heard this saying, it's looking towards the future, but wishing for the past, but for me, it's like, I kind of want to wish for the future and like look forward to the past. Sure. If that's possible, because it was so awesome. Speaking sports mainly, like, the retro kind of stuff, the vintage aspects. But yeah, it's weird seeing kind of the metamorphosis that every sports kind of had the undertaking of within each professional league. The NHL also just revolutionizing, becoming more fast, more safe, more, just fluid. I remember early 2000s hockey, it was just clunky and they were beating the piss out of each other.
But you're talking about pre-lockout hockey. Basically,
yeah.
So pre-2004. So anything before 2004, basically big hulking defensemen who have no skating ability really, but are just bullies on the ice, and that's all they really do. Like, they were standards for all strong NHL teams. So a guy like Chris Pronger or Darian Hatcher or these, just big guys like Zdeno Chara is not the best example because he could actually have a little bit of offensive game while also tailoring his game to be aggressive in his own end and protecting it. But I think that's what you saw, is that they put more of a focus on skill, just like the NBA, because again, the fans dictate kind of not necessarily how the game is going to go, but they're receptive to that. And then also it's about success. You saw in the NHL, and then also they had to kind of change the rules a little bit about clutching and grabbing and stuff like that. They kind of are a little less loose. They're a little loose about it in the playoffs, but at the same time, once you kind of eliminated that, those hulking defensemen or those guys who didn't have a ton of actual hockey skill, they got eliminated very quickly, especially the fighting aspect. So once that kind of got eliminated and you got to focus more on skill, you just saw the NHL take off. Like the season after the lockout, I think still has the second best record of all time for goals per game.
Oh, wow.
Just because of just how ridiculous it was. Just like, whereas I think it's second to like one of the years in like the late 80s kind of thing, when obviously everybody was scoring and Wayne Gretzky's putting up over 200 points and 92 goals in the season.
That the Wayne Gretzky points record, I mean,
I'll say it now. It'll never be broken.
That's yeah.
Same
Ovi's
thing with
the
92
closest.
goals. It'll never be broken.
It's just, and he is still so far off. Ovechkin has some crazy gaudy numbers.
Well, Alexander Ovechkin could hypothetically still break that record. Just the problem is that he has to have I think at least 6 more seasons of 30 goals or more. Yeah. And if there's one player that could do it, it's him. But it's just, he's already mid-30s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not to say that NHL players, they're more conditioned and better recovering than they've ever been. And especially with the way the game is played, injuries are just less now as far as just taking brutal contact, especially because he's the one who's actually more laying the wood than others. Yeah. But at the same time, he is actually that is one record that the all-time goals record, I feel actually could be broken by Ovechkin. You're going to see a lot of things happen maybe over the next few seasons of whether or not Washington can kind of continue this pace of being strong in the Eastern Conference. I suppose they're not really doing conferences this year, but you get my drift. Yeah. Kind of being strong in that conference, and him still playing a top line role, and him still having a sniper type laser from the circle. You know what I mean? The face-off circle. So. Yeah, I think it could happen, but again, that's the one thing about all-time records. I thought the Bulls' 72-10 record would never be touched, and the Warriors did it less than 20 years later. It would be 20 years later in 1998, 18 years later in 2016. So, I guess there are other records maybe Joe DiMaggio hit streak, kind of thing, 55
Cal Ripken games.
Yeah, the Cal Ripken one is never happening.
No,
because there's too much load management and things in general for professional sports. So, you'll never see the Cal Ripken record ever broken.
Is Ricky Henderson's stolen base record still intact?
Oh, yeah. And again, same thing. Nobody's ever going to touch that because
he played every day.
And it's also it's twofold. The catchers are way better now than they were back then. But also guys like him don't have the green light because the risk of them getting to second, like there's a lot more analytics in baseball,
Right.
and the chances of you getting picked off at second comparatively to having a base runner at first, you're more likely to score runs if you just stayed at first than you were if you were to take second. Now, when you have, but that's the thing though, is that you're seeing teams that could be successful that are kind of bucking that trend, maybe playing a little bit more small ball sometimes in the playoffs, and they can have success with it. But those are outliers, I guess would be the word. Whereas more often than not, you're just not going to see guys try to get on base and then try to steal first as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Or steal second, rather. I don't know why I said steal first.
Well, I mean, got to steal
first, I guess,
got to steal first before you steal second.
Yeah.
That's another thing, man. The 80s and 90s baseball too. I mean, we can talk about the juice and the roids and stuff for the supplements. I think it was obviously on the parts of the MLB PA and the MLB just kind of being this weird Wild West. You know, there wasn't a lot of rules or anything in place back then. There were no guidelines, honestly. So, but man, I love the sports we have now. I kind of love the dynamic of where we are with our leagues, but it's hard not to just look at all those Hall of Famers and that golden age of all those sports and just.
Oh, well, one of the things I like my coworker Scott Hastings and I do, like we do that all the time. Like we'll look up like randomly like Greg Maddux, pitch counts and starts and just be like, man, I cannot believe this guy won 3 straight Cy Youngs. And then not only that, he won the Cy Young with the Cubs, and then they just let him walk to the Braves or just, or whatever, or trade. I can't remember. I'd have to look, but either way, they let him walk. And they didn't have to do that. Or even looking at like Tony Gwynn strikeout rates, kind of stuff like that, like in the 90s. And it's just ridiculous. Like some of the stats that you look up, and you're just like, I cannot believe, especially with the Major League Baseball and how it's played now, of strikeout rates just through the roof, that a guy like him would just rake in today's Major League Baseball, even though he's a little heavy set. I don't know. He was very fast for his size. But I also just worry that he probably would have had to lose a little bit of weight. Otherwise, he would be bordering on like Pablo Sandoval territory.
Yeah. Just huffing and puffing and sweating down first baseline.
Well, I mean, he was still steady. Like that's the thing. Like he could run, he could still field. He was still a really good athlete for his size. But guys like Cecil Fielder and stuff like that, I just don't know how successful they could be in today's Major League Baseball.
Throwing out those small body, kind of wide load kind of guys. Kirby Puckett.
Another one.
RIP to him. But I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a 5'7" guy jump over the outfield wall so much. With his arm.
And especially that wall in
Minnesota.
It's not Target Field now. It used, but that wall in the old field, like back in the 90s, was just ridiculous.
It was tall.
It didn't have. It wasn't like green monster type of thing like the Red Sox, but just like the height on it and just the fact that it had huge right field wall, random left field wall that was like not as high, but it just didn't make sense from a field dynamics standpoint. Like I didn't understand like why they built it that way. And you can go back now and watch Kirby Puckett highlights, just seeing him like kind of make these big grabs, timely hits. Like it's not a fluke that they won the World Series back in 1990.
Yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of people forget that they won that World Series in the 90s. I think they went to back-to-back World Series. They won one, and
that's right. I think they just won the one.
They won the one. Okay, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just like that little stuff that even the more hardcore fans just kind of not forget about, but kind of
Well, baseball is more based on history too. So anybody that you're going to be talking about who's a baseball fan, more than likely is very well aware of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, just because, I mean, one of the things that I would recommend too, if you can get access to it, go watch Ken Burns' documentary on baseball. It is amazing for the 80s and 90s because especially the 90s, like where I was just like kid in a candy store, just watching it and seeing like these old highlights and, Burns' narration and everything is just so pinpoint. Check those out if you're looking for a little bit of a nostalgia trip down memory lane.
I wrote it down. I need to watch it again, but I wrote it down, so I'm gonna find that. I love Ken Burns. Ken Burns is man. Now I'm in a baseball mood.
Well, we got baseball coming up. Spring training is up. in these parts. Everybody's talking about Blue Jays World Series. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm also a little bit more of a pragmatic fan than others. Like I'll bet against the Dallas Cowboys every game if it means that I'll make money, like kind of thing. I have no loyalty when it comes to sports betting. Right now, the Jays, I believe, are 18-1 to win the World Series. They're probably the third. I think they're third right now in the American League behind the Yankees and the White Sox to win the World Series, which kind of ridiculous in my opinion. Like I love George Springer. I love the fact they got him, but the reality is that behind Ryu, they don't really have a ton of great starting pitching, in my opinion, to be able to neutralize like a team like the Yankees or the White Sox in a 7-game series. So we'll see. Again, they could surprise. They might be able to trade some prospects and get another stud starting pitcher, or make some moves. But we'll see. You know what I mean? I just think that right now, the reason why they're at 18-1, I don't want to say they're a public team, but they are in Canada for sure. And also just they're one of the few teams outside of the Padres that made the biggest offseason moves. Like, I mean, I know that obviously the Dodgers signing Trevor Bauer is just ridiculous. Like they were already plus 300 to win the World Series. And then they signed Bauer, who is the reigning Cy Young winner in the National League. And he's probably their third best starting pitcher, like behind Kershaw and Walker Buehler. And you could argue on some days that David Price, because he's a lefty and they don't have could be better than Bauer against certain lineups. So it's just a wealth of riches. The Dodgers just print money at this rate. They're going to at least win the National League West. I mean, the Padres could challenge them, but I just think the Padres from an offensive standpoint just can't hold a candle to what the Dodgers can do. But right now, I think it's going to be the Dodgers probably in the World Series facing the White Sox. If I was to make a prediction, like a super early, don't quote me on it, in 6 months type of prediction. But right now, that's kind of the teams that I've kind of identified as teams that I think are going to do well. I think the Yankees, like they're so good, like offensively, like they could field 2 offensive lineups if they wanted to. But just behind Garrett Cole, like obviously they got Corey Kluber. Their starting pitching just doesn't blow my skirt up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I love Garrett Cole. Don't get me wrong. I think Garrett Cole probably, you could argue, should have won Cy Young last year. It's just, it was a shortened season. They only had like 10 starts. Like you basically had to be perfect, like Shane Bieber was, to even win the award. But I think that's the one thing that from a Yankees standpoint, like I would understand why anybody would want to bet on the Yankees. Like, why wouldn't you? They're going to probably win the AL East. They're going to probably have at least the 2 seed in the playoffs in the American League. And, the fact that just, their offenses can just basically put up 8 runs on anybody, like at any point. Like, so baseball wise, I think that's kind of what I'm looking at right now is Dodgers, White Sox, if I'm looking at it from a betting perspective. As far as betting on it game to game, I don't bet on Major League Baseball for the first week because baseball is such a stats driven sport. Mm-hmm. I need to see numbers. I need to see tons of things before I can comfortably bet it. I will say that me and my buddies, like, maybe we'll bet like, opening day or whatever, maybe bet a first 5 or something like that, or maybe a strikeout prop or something like that, just to have some action, but we're not putting real money on it, like $10, $20 kind of thing. Just to kind of juices going. Yeah. Just to kind of test it out and be like, okay, if I lose, no big deal. If I win, then I'm going out for supper tonight.
Right. Yeah. We're eating Chick-fil-A tonight, y'all.
Yeah. Instead of chicken nuggets.
Canada, right?
Yeah.
Is Chick-fil-A in Canada?
No, and maybe it is, and maybe some major markets like maybe Toronto, but it just, as far as widespread as Chick-fil-A is in the States, no, they haven't really branched out yet.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say that was a very American thing of me to say. Just assume that y'all had Chick-fil-A in Canada, but yes, very stoked for baseball on my end. I'm working for Hoopball right now. We got the baseball article going, doing all the breakdowns, the over unders for the win totals, and talking about some prospects. And one of the prospects I was really excited about last year, and the reason I watched a ton of Blue Jays games was Nathan Peterson. I mean, I still have my notebook, my baseball notebook from last year of just pages of me, watching hit the games that he started and just literally just kind of baseball diarying, Nathan Peterson threw a sinker
Yeah.
at this batter and he made weak content. Just little stuff like that, how he got out of jams and how his pitch sequence changing and his communication with the catcher and just stuff like that. Really exciting pitcher. I liked him in college. He was really exciting in the college NCAA tournament there for baseball. And the Blue Jays, man, you guys, like I said, pretty public team as far as like you said, as far as you're concerned. But I mean, you guys got some really nice pieces. Y'all did some exciting stuff. I'm a Cubs fan, so we're just, I don't know. It's
just coast on 2016 and let it ride.
Yeah. It happened. It's like, yeah, I got to just live with that one. That's how it goes. So, well, gee, man, I think I'm going to go ahead and start getting us wrapped up here towards the end of the show. We covered a lot of ground and talked about a lot of fun stuff, and I really appreciate it. We were able to get some really good insight for the listeners as far as your process, the Wizard of Oz, kind of pull the curtain back, and just shooting the breeze itself, getting windy here on the podcast. That was something I was looking forward to. I know you're a historian of the games, and the nostalgic road travel was always fun. But I also just want to remind listeners again, at the top show we talked about it, but where to find you, at oddshark.com, obviously. And then at GDawg, DAWG 5000, all caps, is where you will find him at on Twitter. I'm not sure how that works vocabulary wise, grammar wise. But any other things from you? Any other parting words you want to throw out there to the Hoopball listeners before we get?
Yeah. I just wanted to tell anybody who wants to follow me or follow my stuff. Like, again, like you just said, it's GDawg 5000 on Twitter. So GDAWG 5000. Or you can go to oddshark.com. And you go to the NFL and NBA sections, you can find all of my work there. Or if you just want to be able to see kind of what I'm writing, because it's not always about NBA and NFL. Like a couple of weeks ago, or even just this past week, rather, I did a preview on the Golden Globes. These types of things that I kind of try to handicap and project odds for. So in my Twitter bio, I have the link directly to my author page at Oddshark, and that has every single piece of content that I've ever written there. So you can read that, kind of get a kind of a grasp of my style and a look at kind of what I'm looking at, and you can judge, you can comment, you can call me out. I don't really care. You can say whatever you want. It's the old phrase, it's a free country, as they say. And so yeah, that's pretty much what you could find from me. Now, the one thing that's going to be happening now is I am betting on a lot of NBA underdogs lately. One of the things I've been promoting a lot lately is the NBA Underdog Report at Oddshark. You can check that out. It's on my profile, or you can go to Oddshark's Twitter. You can see them promoting it as well. And then, of course, March Madness coming up here in a couple of weeks. I'm likely going to take a little break on NBA betting for the rest of the month once we get to the All-Star break, so I can focus more of my capital on March Madness games. And once March Madness wraps up, then we're going back into regular season mode and wrapping up those and heading right into playoffs. And then before you know it, the summer will be here, and the summer will probably be almost over by the time some of these seasons wrap up, and then we're right back in the NFL. So I'll sleep kind of when I'm dead at this stage. I got two little ones who kind of keep me up, so they make sure that I don't sleep in. So it helps me, I guess, from a handicapping perspective, that I can get up and start kind of looking at stats. But check it out. Feel free to DM me if you have questions, or if you want to comment on posts. Obviously, try to be nice about it if you can. But at the same time, if you ever want to shoot the breeze, or have me on a pod or whatever else, just reach out. I'd love to chat with you.
Well, there you have it, y'all. I mean, that was my experience. I was a little reluctant, a little timid to send a message at first, but here we are, and I appreciate it. Man, we unpacked a good amount. Listeners, don't forget about the 5-star reviews for us. Excuse me. We are still doing the giveaway, the cash giveaway. You take a screenshot of that 5-star review, leave a couple words down, constructive criticism preferred, and screenshot it to me or the rest of the Hoopball guys, and we'll get you entered in on that drawing to get you a cash prize. So get that going. Leave us some 5-star reviews. Help us get in there in that algorithm and the search bar and all that good stuff. So we're going to continue to have these awesome guests on the show. We're going to continue making you money, and we're going to continue having some really great insight and deep digs and analysis. So, Mr. Gallant, I said I would say it a few times, so here it is again. Thanks, man. Like, I appreciate it.
No, Devin, I appreciate it, man. And obviously, we had a good chat today. And make sure you guys follow his pod, and make sure to follow him. And he's clearly a student of the game. If he's able to kind of shoot the breeze with me about some stuff in the 90s and 2000s. And right now this has been great. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to reach out to you during baseball season after that first week or two. I think it'd be fun to have you on to talk some numbers that you're looking at once baseball gets nice and analytical and rolling. And of course, football season, you might just have to come on every couple months or something. We'll have a running tab or something. So, but man, I'm going to wrap a bow on this one. And again, I'm just going to exit with a thank you to you and a thank you to the listeners. And as always, I'm sending you all of my good vibes and all of my good energies. And we are looking at a great day today. And let's spread some positivity. Let's be nice. Let's be healthy. Let's be safe. And I look forward to the next one. Guys, thanks again, man. Huge honor. There it is. There's the 4th and the 5th one. I told you they were coming in.
Oh man, you've rolled out the red carpet for me, Devin. So no, I appreciate everything on this.
Awesome. Well, but I'll let you get on with your day. I know you're busy. Good luck with your picks and your plays today and the analysis and just with life in general, bud. I wish the best for you.
No, same. Right back at you, Devin.
Awesome. Well, take care, man. You'll hear from me soon, and hopefully we get you back on here in the next couple months.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.